LSU's doing bang-up work in recruiting. I don't want to lose the message of, that's where we were. LSU's cleaning up right now. Speaking of it, Sammy Spiegelman is already there, and let's go to Spiegs. I believe he's up in New York this morning as he checks in with us here on this Friday. Sammy, good morning. How are you, man?
Doing great, Jordy. How you doing?
Doing good, man. If you could, somebody who covers this part of football, wrap up what the last week has been like for LSU. It has been a flurry of commitments and big-time names coming through as commits that feels like it started on July 1st and has continued through last night. What do you make of the last week LSU has had?
It's just that time of the year. I think everyone's getting excited, and I think everyone just kind of forgets that this is the summer. This is what happens in the summer. And nowadays, camp season is always, prolific for commitments. You get a bunch of kids on campus for the first time. A lot of kids that got offered in the spring or are now on their second or third visits to school. And then you have camp season. You have official visits going on during camp season. So these are turning into just monster weekends. For LSU in particular, they had a couple of big official visit weekends in June, and you're starting to see the fruits of those visits. July 4th is it's almost as busy as the early signing period if you really think about it. You have double-digit commitments, and they're all getting ready to go back to school in a couple of weeks, or maybe take one more visit and then make a decision before their senior season. So it's just that time of the year, and LSU is capitalizing off of all that.
Jeremiah Hughes, the latest, a cornerback commitment from Bishop Gorman in Vegas. He pledged last night to LSU. What do you know about him, and how big is this commitment for the class?
Hey, I really like this kid. I'm not going to talk about the On3 rankings as being underrated, but he's a kid that I think by the end of his senior season is going to have a stock up. I got to see him out in Las Vegas a couple of months ago, and he's about 6'2", 180 plus pounds. He moves really naturally. I think he's a little bit raw, and I think he needs a little bit of coaching. Develop, see if he can get his hips out a little bit better. He's got a little bit to go, but physically he stands out. I think he plays receiver and DB for Bishop Gorman, one of the top powerhouses in the high school level in the country. He plays on the same team as Zachariah Branch and gets to defend him every single day. So I think he's going to get better, and he's going to go to LSU and continue to develop. I think he's a little bit raw at this stage. Maybe he's a little bit underrated, but he's someone that, going to work with Robert Steeples and be a big corner, work on the boundary, and that's an area of need for LSU in this 2023 cycle. A
guy who we talked about the last time we talked, LSU was just finishing up one of their camps on campus in the month of June, and Lance Hurd from Neville really shined, and I think the trend started to point towards LSU. I spoke with a University of Texas a staffer, Brandon Harris, former LSU quarterback, over the weekend, and he says they feel real good about where they sit with Hurd. What's the latest on Hurd, and when do you expect his announcement?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Brandon Harris, and I obviously took in part of what you were saying, and he's doing great at Texas, and he's a big reason why Texas is in the mix or has commitments from so many elite guys from Louisiana right now. Lance Hurd did not show up for his Texas official visit, which is probably the most interesting tidbit I can share with you. He did make it to Nebraska, and then he worked out at LSU, and he ended up staying for an unofficial visit for the entire weekend of LSU's elite camp. Right now, I already have an RPM for LSU. I think my colleague Billy does as well. And right now, it's all LSU. Brad Davis has always had the in with LSU. And you talked about him before. Mike Denbrock has spent a lot of time with Lance Hurd, talking about him being a franchise left tackle playing opposite of Will. And right now, I would say it's a matter of if, not when Lance Hurd commits to LSU. Texas is certainly in it. They have been in it for a good amount of time. Bo Davis was leading that recruitment. But since Lance has kind of settled on the offensive side of the ball, sees his future at tackle, I think LSU has been the team to beat since they finally got him on campus in June.
Jalen Brown, that's great news, by the way, on Hurd. Jalen Brown, 5-star wide receiver out of South Florida, is set to pledge and make his commitment this afternoon. LSU seems to be a school that is trending there, even with hometown Miami making a push for him to get on campus. What have you heard of Brown's recruitment? What do you expect this afternoon?
Yeah, I put my prediction in again last month for LSU, and that seemed like a little bit of a dark horse pick at the time. And, I say this now, I'm still fairly confident in that. LSU has done a fantastic job of this is really a Brian Kelly and a Cortez Hankton tandem. Brian Kelly had Notre Dame in the mix with Jalen. And then Cortez Hankton had Georgia as a leader with Jalen at a certain point in his recruitment. And they met up at LSU, and the Graduate Champions logo is prominent with Jalen. He's been to Michigan, he's been to Texas, and Miami is probably the team pushing LSU the hardest as crunch time gets closer. But all things considered, he's putting academics over football. And the graduate champions logo is what I keep hearing is probably the biggest difference between LSU and Miami now. Miami is rolling on the recruiting trail just like LSU right now. They got Jaden Rashada and Francis Malaga, the 5-star offensive tackle from IMG. NIL, if that is certainly a factor down the stretch. We'll see if Miami can make this a little bit more interesting toward the end. But right now, all signs point to LSU, and that's a credit really to Coach Hankton, who's had him on campus, I think, more than any other school, along with Florida State and Miami, which is pretty significant considering it's LSU for a Miami kid.
Sammy, how much does NIL come into the pitch?
You have to think about it. These kids are name, image, likeness. They represent what that means, right? So they're talking about life-changing money in certain situations. If you are if you're a kid that's looking out of state, NIL gives you the opportunity for not only you, but maybe your family to attend more games than they would have otherwise. And then in state, obviously opportunities not only while you're playing, but after football it comes into play. So it's a huge factor. It's almost like NFL free agency at this point between the transfer portal and NIL and just regular signing classes. There's so many different elements to adjust your roster. You talk about LSU or Ohio State or any one of these schools. They're running NFL front offices at this stage.
Yeah. No, Matt House came into the studio a couple of weeks back and we asked him about the resources compared to a big-time school like LSU and coming from the Kansas City Chiefs who won the Super Bowl 3 years ago. And he said that they had more resources at LSU, and it wasn't even close. This from like departments and nutrition and rehab and everything that they have at their disposal. It's greater at LSU. We have a question from a listener. John Quab asked specifically about Chase Bisontis, who is from New Jersey. Is it Bisontis? The offensive line, Bisontis, who was on an official visit to LSU a couple of weeks back. But more on the offensive line in this class. I know we talked about Hurd, but how many other targets? What do you expect from a commitment standpoint on offensive line for LSU during this cycle?
Yeah, another kid that was on campus with Hurd during the elite camp was Dellinger. His brother's obviously on the roster, and he's set to commit sometime today. And I think all the tea leaves are pointing to Michigan State, which just got a huge commitment yesterday, thanks to a Louisiana guy and Brandon Jordan and Mel Tucker. But all things considered, offensive line, it seems like every year we talk about this. LSU's in a great spot with Lance Hurd, who's a future first-round pick, as we've talked about. But the rest of the offensive line remains in flux. That's going to be a big target for them. Going into the season, they got guys like Chase Bisontis and TJ Shanahan, and I think that LSU right now might be trailing for both, but they have plenty of time, I think, to gain ground and offensive line, especially on the interior. If you're going to be able to reel in a guy like Hurd, but he's able to do, you need to find some guys to plug in on the inside, and obviously you got great guys last year like Will Campbell and Emory Jones and Bo Bordelon, but they need to continue to supplant that, and I think that they got a long ways to go. They might have to turn in state on a couple of guys, the Caden Jones from De La Salle, Tyree Adams from St. Aug. There's other guys. Now, those are true tackles. But if you're LSU, you got to take what you can get, and it's just not a deep O-line class in the state or in the area this year.
That was harassment on that name that I
did. He butchered it. And he didn't even know what to say.
That was an assault.
Not going to correct him.
On Bisontis, his last name, who turned out to be Bisontis. My bad, Chase. I'll just go Chase B next time.
Very phonetic of you.
Sammy, I'm getting also
Country
dragged.
origin,
I'm getting dragged for a couple of takes that I had with national versus local recruiting for LSU, saying that LSU really needs to build defense around the state, obviously, and that the nucleus of all the championship teams have always been Louisiana guys. Obviously, they are dominating right now outside of the state. How do you see the balance kind of breaking down with Kelly and his staff?
They have the staff that's equipped to go national, and they have a staff that's very equipped to get the elite guys in the state of Louisiana. Now, this is a very unique cycle, this 2023 class. Arch Manning is at the top of it. Arch was not going to go to LSU, and I think it's actually a pretty impressive feat that LSU was as far along with Arch when it was all said and done before he ultimately picked Texas over Georgia and Alabama. And then you have unique situations where there's 3 quarterbacks and they're all committed to different schools out of state, and I don't expect that to be the situation in a couple of months. But for right now, a lot of the elite guys in state have either not made their decision or they found their home. You're not going to get everybody, but this staff is fully equipped to go out of state. Sure, you got guys like Brad Davis, who's homegrown, Baton Rouge. Frank Wilson is the godfather of Louisiana. Joe Sloan is one of the young, youthful, energetic coaches that has gravitated on the offensive side of the ball, has national appeal. And Cortez Hankton, who, he's from New Orleans, he's from St. Aug, he recruits New Orleans, he recruits the state, but he's coming off a national championship at Georgia, and that's going to help with guys like Jalen Brown, who's set to announce in a few hours. So they have the ability. They have commitments from all over the Midwest at edge and D-line, which is just not a strong suit in Louisiana this year. So, you can always have the argument that, LSU has to go from in-state first, and I certainly agree with that. There's plenty of talent on a year-in, year-out basis. But at certain positions, it's just a little bit thinner in 2023 and deeper at others, like quarterback. They're deep at quarterback. That's not usually the case. And they're weak at D-line, which is usually not the case.
Right.
So they've gone to the Midwest. They've gone into Maryland. They've gone into Georgia. They beat out Ohio State and Georgia for a D-lineman. They got the number one players from Minnesota and Indiana, which is just insane to even say out loud sometimes. And they're still recruiting Louisiana. Guys like Shelton Sampson and Lance Hurd and Caleb Jackson and Kylan Jackson. There's still a lot of big guys on the board that are in-state. And sure, if LSU is going to go to a national championship, they're going to have plenty of in-state flavor. But each cycle is just different, and the staff is attacking accordingly.
I know that they have a long way before this one gets on campus in Xavier Atkins, but the commitment came through in the 2024 pledge earlier this week. Sammy, I thought I read it wrong when I saw that he had 200 tackles last year. I mean, how good of a football player is this kid?
Yeah, the two outside linebackers, you talk about positions of strength in Louisiana. The two for 2024, Xavier Atkins and Kalaj Cobbins out of Destrehan, and the two of them put up video game-like numbers, especially Xavier out of Jonesboro Hodge, which is obviously, you guys know, it's not exactly in the Baton Rouge or New Orleans area where he's getting a ton of pub, but he's been a major LSU target since, the middle of his sophomore season. Puts up video game numbers. He's a little bit raw. He's got range, though. He's, all the physical attributes that you love to see from an outside linebacker: speed, explosiveness, range, sideline to sideline. And he, getting the 2024 class on board early on, you're starting to see, everyone pays attention to the 2023 class, but during the summer months and leading into the season, they're starting to build their foundation for the 2024 class. And, ultimately, Xavier Atkins and Maurice Williams, those two that they got in 2024, are going to be representing LSU on the recruiting trail with a lot of the in-state guys for 2024 that we're going to start talking about here in the next couple of months. So Xavier is going to end up being probably a fan favorite of these LSU fans. He's an outward fan of LSU. I think he's been waiting to commit for some time. He was recruited by Blake Baker at Missouri, who was just on LSU staff, obviously. So you knew that it was going to come eventually. He's a really great foundational piece early on for LSU on defense.
Cordell Music, hashtag Ask Speaks. Any word on the linebacker Justin Jefferson?
Yeah, I think he might have just committed to Ohio State.
Oh, wow! Sorry about that.
I'm pretty sure that was last week.
But today should be a very active day for LSU, correct? Or at least hats on the table for LSU.
Yeah, I like where LSU stands with Jalen Brown. I think it's a little bit of a dark horse pick, and obviously with the hometown school, as you guys well know about LSU and in-state kids, same with Miami and their in-state kids. If LSU is able to get a commitment today, which I expect them to do, the biggest thing will be continuing to recruit him during the season. At Miami, we'll be able to get him on campus easier. But he's taken his official visit to LSU, and now he's been to LSU more than any other school. The key will be keeping that momentum into the season, and obviously a lot of that is how Mario Cristobal's Miami Hurricanes play and Brian Kelly's Tigers play.
Sammy, one more. Jordan Matthews. It seems like obviously the news came out with his official visit list. LSU wasn't on it. That kind of kicked up a cloud here locally. Where do you stand on his recruitment? What do you expect from him over the next couple of weeks?
He just got back from 3 official visits. He went to Stanford, to Michigan, and Tennessee. And next up, he's going to head back to Austin. You talked about Brandon Harris. This is a guy that Brandon's been recruiting for years. He's going to be back at Texas at the end of this month. And there's obviously a lot of momentum for Louisiana guys in Austin right now with Derek Williams, the Raptor, committed, and Arch committed. And then Texas is certainly going to try to get one out of Jordan. Jordan's hoping to have a decision made before Woodlawn kicks off their season. But he has openly said he's not going to rush his decision, and I don't think that he needs to. Pete Golding offered after the spring game, and Alabama has certainly gotten his attention as well. And LSU reaffirmed their offer. He worked out and got the offer. Steeples, Jordan Arseman, Joe Sloan, Frank Wilson, the whole gang of in-state recruiters are all after Jordan. I think they kind of realized that they were playing from behind and they got a ways to go. But they're not going to take their foot off the gas. And I think for LSU's purposes, the longer Jordan waits to commit works in their favor. Right now, they have some ground to make up just because he has got a lot of great options. And he's been to Texas, I think, more than any other school. And he's got a lot of interest in Alabama and he's going to OV there for the season opener. Again, longer it goes, longer LSU has a chance to make up with Jordan, but they are playing from behind.
I'm going to rapid fire you a couple of names real quick if you can help me out on them. Kylan Jackson, Zachary.
I think it's between LSU and A&M. He's going to try to see some schools like Oregon and Michigan, but I think ultimately, if not August, maybe by September, he has a decision made. I like LSU slightly over A&M.
Caleb Jackson, running back out of Liberty here in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, just took all 3 of his official visits. He's on the clock. A decision is expected here sometime in the next couple of weeks. I like LSU's chances. Frank Wilson has dialed it up in a big-time way for this kid, and he reminds me of Jonathan Taylor 2.0.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Tackett Curtis out of Manny High School.
Also a kid on the clock, took official visits to USC, to Wisconsin, and Ohio State. Depending on who you talk to, some people will point to Wisconsin, some people will talk to Ohio State. I think Ohio State ultimately wins out, and I think right now it's too close to call, but I think ultimately they win out.
Shelton Sampson.
I think he ultimately winds up at LSU. I think Florida State might actually be the team that's running second for him. People think it might be A&M. People think it might be Alabama, but that relationship with Coach Fertitta and the trust that his parents have in Florida State is giving LSU a little bit of a run for their money. But I think Shelton ultimately winds up at LSU. I think he's going to be one of those prize pieces in this class. And I think a decision may be sooner than expected. I don't think this is going to go all the way to signing day. I think it'll be before then.
Sammy, are you home in New York? Is this where you're from originally?
Originally, yes. Have not been home in some time, but just checking on my niece. She just turned 2 months.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. What part of the state?
Long Island.
Hey.
That makes a lot
watch
of
yourself
sense.
this weekend, Sammy. Later, bro. When you come through Baton Rouge, you got to get you in studio.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna hit you up about it.
All right, man. There he is. At Sam Spiegs. Follow him on social media. Sammy Spiegelman from On3. Up in New York, visiting family, giving us a little rapid fire on recruiting information on where they sit now. Justin Jefferson, the linebacker that we asked him about, committed to Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah.